Nepal not just can, but is a leader on these issues. LGBTQI people exist in Nepal, they're changing Nepal, and more of Nepal sees them as valued and valuable. I also heard that LGBTQI people in Nepal want access to equal marriage, they want to be able to adopt children, and they want to be recognized as parents. Respect all people, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or sex characteristics. Love your children, no matter who they are. Your children matter to you. Don't reject them.
अमेरिकाले लैङ्गिक तथा यौनिक अल्पसंख्यक LGBTIQ व्यक्तिहरूको अधिकारमा नेपाल लिडर कन्ट्री रहेको बताएको छ। अमेरिकी राष्ट्रपति जो बाइडेनकी लैङ्गिक तथा यौनिक अल्पसंख्यक मामिला विशेष दूत जेसिका स्टर्नले दक्षिण एसियामा नेपाल लिडर देश रहेको बताएकी हुन्।
Nepal is a beacon of hope in this region. When I travel frequently, and one of the things that LGBTQI people in other countries say to me is, we want to be more like Nepal. They have gotten recognition from the courts. They have had an out gay member of parliament. They get meetings with the government. They're not criminalized in Nepal. I mean, these are almost unimaginable markers of success in the region. And that's one of the reasons I came to Nepal, because Nepal is a symbol of hope. And Nepal not just can, but is a leader on these issues. And when there's that opportunity, you just want, what do I want to say? When there's that opportunity, progress on LGBTQI rights in Nepal, it has a spillover effect. It's not only good for people in Nepal, it's good for people across South Asia.
लैङ्गिक तथा यौनिक अल्पसंख्यक समलिङ्गी तेस्रोलिङ्गी अन्तर्लिङ्गी बाइसेक्सुअल क्वेयर व्यक्तिहरूको अवस्था समीक्षा गर्न 5 दिने काठमाडौँ भ्रमण गरेकी बाइडेनकी विशेषदूत स्टर्नले सरकारी अधिकारीहरू मानवाधिकार कर्मी र LGBTIQ व्यक्तिहरूसँग छलफल गरेपछि अधिकारका विषयमा नेपाल उदार देश रहेको प्रतिक्रिया दिएकी हुन्।
I think the most important form of support that we can give is by having relationships with the community, listening to the community, and helping to elevate the LGBTQI community's priorities. So it takes many different forms. For example, we're here meeting in this extraordinary space, and the U.S. has a long history of a relationship with this space because it has supported LGBTQI artists and youth artists who are pushing for human rights for all people. So it takes many different forms, but yesterday was a thrilling day. Yesterday the U.S. Embassy marched in the Gai Jatra parade, and I didn't see other government delegations there, but the Blue Diamond Society and other community organizations said it really matters to have recognition from a government. And so I think part of the support we give is by taking LGBTQI people seriously and showing up.
पहिचान अनुसारको नागरिकता, वैवाहिक समानता, रोजगारीका अवसर, धर्म सन्तान राख्न पाउने अधिकारका लागि पहल भइरहेको आफूले पाएको उनले सुनाइन्। अमेरिकी सरकारका विशेष दूतहरू सामान्यतया विशेष विषयगत मुद्दाहरूमा केन्द्रित हुने गरेको भन्दै उनले LGBTIQ व्यक्तिहरूको मानवाधिकारलाई अगाडि बढाउने आफ्नो भूमिका रहने बताइन्।
So special envoys from the U.S. government generally focus on a particular thematic issue, like a category of human rights. So we have special envoys working on racial equity and justice, disability rights, women's rights, religious freedom, and then there's my role, which is the special envoy for the advancement of the human rights of LGBTQI persons. And as a special envoy, I have many roles. I was appointed by President Biden in June 2021, and I serve as our lead on foreign policy as relates to LGBTQI issues. So that can influence everything from the issues that we prioritize at the multilateral level, like the United Nations, to the human rights concerns we raise in a bilateral relationship with another government. I set the policy direction of our main grant-making mechanism for LGBTQI rights around the world, and I consider it my obligation to listen to LGBTQI people around the world, to both sound the alarm when people are in crisis, but also to try to organize resources to help them, because LGBTQI people everywhere deserve equal rights before the law.
एमनेस्टी इन्टरनेसनल र ह्युमन राइट्स वाचमा अधिकारकर्मीको रूपमा लामो समय काम गरेकी स्टनले पहिचान अनलाइनसँग विशेष कुराकानी गर्दै नेपालमा लैङ्गिक तथा यौनिक अल्पसंख्यक व्यक्तिहरूको अधिकारको लागि राम्रो संवैधानिक प्रबन्ध रहेको बताइन्। तर कार्यान्वयनमा भने जटिलता रहेको उनले सुनाइन्।
One of the opportunities that I have as Special Envoy is to identify countries' best practices on LGBTQI rights, because there is not a country on the planet that doesn't have discrimination against LGBTQI people. So with that in mind, the question is, how can we accelerate the pace of change? What laws, policies, and programs should governments invest in so that LGBTQI people enjoy full access to citizenship and rights? Nepal has been on the vanguard in terms of recognition in the Constitution, seminal Supreme Court decisions, and in fact the US government can learn a lot from some of the formal legal equality of the government of Nepal. But there's always a gap between the promise of the law and its implementation. So I came here in part to understand how the US government can support LGBTQI people in Nepal to make sure that they're living, their best lives. And unfortunately, I heard from LGBTQI people here, as I hear from LGBTQI people in every country, that there's a long way to go. And so as the US has a very strong bilateral relationship with Nepal, we're always interested in knowing how we can support the LGBTQI and Nepali community in general.
आफूसँगको भेटमा यस समुदायका प्रतिनिधिहरूले नागरिकता लगायतका आफूले भएका समस्याहरू राखेको उनले जानकारी दिइन्।
So I've been here for a few days and I've met with more than 50 LGBTQI people here in Nepal, and I heard a broad range of issues. I heard that transgender people still experience very high levels of discrimination and violence, and that it's very difficult to change your citizenship documents. And without access to legal documents that accurately reflect your name and gender marker, it's hard to get a job, it's hard to get housing, it's hard to be respected. I heard that lesbian and bisexual women are so invisible that they deal with very severe discrimination and violence at the intersections of homophobia and sexism. And that forced marriage is unfortunately the consequence for many of them. I heard that people want the rape law to be expanded because any person of any gender or any sexual orientation can be raped of rape. I also heard that LGBTQI people in Nepal want access to equal marriage, they want to be able to adopt children, and they want to be recognized as parents.
उनका अनुसार पहिचान अनुसारको नागरिकतामा पहुँच नभएसम्म उनीहरूले अन्य अधिकारहरू प्राप्त गर्दैनन्। नेपालका लैङ्गिक तथा यौनिक अल्पसंख्यक समुदायका लागि आफूहरूले निरन्तर सहयोग गरेको र महत्त्वपूर्ण सहयोग उनीहरूसँगको सम्बन्ध रहेको स्टनले उल्लेख गरेकी छन्। मैले सुनेको छु कि ट्रान्सजेन्डरहरूले अझै पनि उच्च स्तरको भेदभाव र हिंसाको अनुभव गर्छन् र नागरिकतामा परिवर्तन गर्न धेरै गाह्रो छ। उनले भनिन्, कानुनी कागजातको पहुँच बिना काम, आवाज र सम्मान पाउन गाह्रो छ।
LGBTQI people in Nepal are still afraid to come out, and they're afraid to come out for very practical reasons. When you're out, you risk family rejection. I met a lot of LGBTQI people who cannot live at home with their families because their families don't accept them. I met LGBTQI people who are homeless because they find it very difficult to find a landlord who will rent to them. I met LGBTQI people who are unemployed or underemployed because as soon as an employer knows their sexual orientation or gender identity, they're out the door. So the question is not for me so much what should LGBTQI people, but really what can everybody do to support LGBTQI people in Nepal? And I think the lessons are really simple. Respect all people, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or sex characteristics. Love your children, no matter who they are. Your children matter to you. Don't reject them. And governments in all countries, including here in Nepal, need to ensure that the most vulnerable get additional support. Right? And that takes many forms. But one thing that gives me hope is the forthcoming data from the 2021 census. And I hope that that data, which will be the first national census to meaningfully include LGBTQI people, will result in increased resources for LGBTQI Nepalis.
बाइडेनकी विशेष दूत स्टन नेपालका लैङ्गिक तथा यौनिक अल्पसंख्यक व्यक्तिहरूको गाईजात्रा उत्सवमा उत्साहका साथ सहभागी भइन्। अमेरिकी दूतावासको सहयोगमा बौद्ध स्तूपामा युनिटी फर चेन्जले गरेको प्राइड महोत्सव र ठमेलदेखि टुँडिखेलसम्म निलिरा समाजले गरेको गाईजात्रा उत्सवमा उनी सहभागी भइन्। स्वतन्त्रपूर्वक कसैको डर त्रासमा नरही आफ्नो चाहना अनुसारको वेशभूषामा घरबाट निस्कन पाउनुलाई गर्व गर्न लैङ्गिक तथा यौनिक अल्पसंख्यक व्यक्तिहरू सहभागी हुन्छन् गाईजात्रामा। निलिरा समाजले सडकमा निस्केर पहिचान खुलाउने दिनका रूपमा मनाउन सुरु गरेको गाईजात्रामा कन्सर्ट समेत आयोजना भएको छ। पछिल्लो केही वर्षदेखि विदेशी पाहुना समेत सहभागी भइरहेका छन् यौनिक तथा लैङ्गिक अल्पसंख्यकको गौरवको पर्व गाईजात्रा उत्सवमा। लैङ्गिक तथा यौनिक अल्पसंख्यक व्यक्तिहरूको गाईजात्रा उत्सवलाई अमेरिकी दूतावासले सप्ताहव्यापी प्राइड परेड भनेर सहयोग मात्रै गरेन, राष्ट्रपति जो बाइडेनकी विशेष दूतलाई नै निम्त्यायो। बाइडेन प्रशासनकी लैङ्गिक तथा यौनिक अल्पसंख्यक मामिला दूत जेसिका स्टनले उत्साहका साथ गौरवको पर्वको निम्तो मानिन्। काठमाडौँको ठमेलबाट सुरु भएको गाईजात्रा उत्सवको र्यालीमा सहभागी भएर स्टन टुँडिखेलको कन्सर्टसम्म पुगिन्। अघिल्लो दिन लैङ्गिक तथा यौनिक अल्पसंख्यक व्यक्तिहरूको कार्यक्रममा सहभागी हुन बौद्ध स्तूपामा पुगेकी स्टनलाई बौद्ध क्षेत्र संरक्षणका अध्यक्ष राजकुमार लामा लगायतको टोलीले स्वागत नै गरेको थियो। स्तूपामा प्राइड कार्यक्रम गर्न मिल्दैन भनेको संरक्षण समितिले पछि कार्यक्रम राख्न दिएको थियो। बाइडेनकी विशेष दूत स्टनले नागरिकता विधेयक, बलात्कार सम्बन्धी कानुन, समलिङ्गी विवाह, जनगणनामा लैङ्गिक तथा यौनिक अल्पसंख्यकको विषयमा चासो राखेर कानुन मन्त्री कोइराला र महिला बालबालिका तथा ज्येष्ठ नागरिक मन्त्री रेग्मीसँग छुट्टा छुट्टै छलफल गरेकी थिइन्।
The Minister of Women, Children and Senior Citizens delivered fiery remarks supporting the LGBTQI community. You know, I've met with countless LGBTQI organizations here, and they're strong and they are smart. I've also met with wonderful allies who are trying to do their part to support LGBTQI people. And I just came from a lunch with a group of young people. I think the oldest was like 25 years old. And they're carving out a space, and they are on the vanguard of changing the country. So I leave here with confidence that LGBTQI people exist in Nepal, they're changing Nepal, and more of Nepal sees them as valued and valuable.